All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in today. We're excited that you're here. So, welcome to our Lunch and Learn webinar titled Explore Publishing Possibilities with Manifold. This webinar is brought to you by the generous support from the Hewlett Foundation. This webinar will be our last webinar for this summer to promote student success at the institutional, the regional, and national levels. And my name is Allison Buckley. I'll be your moderator for today. I am one of two OER program specialists at the Southern Regional Education Board, and I am delighted that you've decided to join this chat. If you feel comfortable, we encourage you to drop your name, your institution, and the state that you represent into the chat at this time. And while you are doing that, I will just quickly review our agenda for today. First, we'll start off with intros and discuss the mission of SREB, and also share a couple of upcoming events. And then we'll also jump right into our presentation with Manifold, which I'm excited about and been looking forward to for some weeks now. And then we will jump into our Q&A session for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then last, okay. So I see New York City College of Technology is here. Welcome. Glad you made it. So let's jump right into our mission for SREB. If this is your first time joining us, to kind of give you some context of who we are the nation's first regional interstate compact for education. SREB was created in 1948 by Southern governors and legislators who recognized the link between education and economic vitality. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit interstate compact of 16 states headquartered in Atlanta. This year, we have identified 5 priority topics: artificial intelligence in education, career pathways, longitudinal literacy, teacher workforce, and post-secondary student success. The Southern Regional Education Board works with states to improve education at every level, from early childhood through doctoral education and the workforce. And we are excited to announce one of our upcoming annual events, the Student Success Summit. This event will highlight the importance of post-secondary student success. So when you come, expect to have strategies and collaborative conversations to help universities improve success rate. This year, our theme is empowering every learner, unlocking student potential for economic mobility and community growth. The summit will focus on 4 areas. 1 is access to post-secondary education. 2 is retention. 3rd is persistence, including those OER initiatives, and graduation to post-graduation opportunities. And as you can see on this slide, the OER pre-conference will be held on Monday, September the 9th, in Frankfort, Kentucky. And this pre-conference is going to be open to everyone, thanks to the overwhelming generosity of the Hewlett Foundation. So make sure you register. It is complimentary, but registration is required. Oh, and let me know, we are accepting proposals at this time as well. All right, and now to meet our guest panelists for today. So first we have Terrence Meyer, Digital Projects Editor, University of Minnesota Press. He is an experienced publisher exploring the intersection of new technologies and media forms with traditional print production. In his current role, he helps develop projects for the Minnesota instance of Manifold and informs the general direction of Manifold based on his 20 years of experience in scholarly publishing and his collaborations with other Manifold publishers. Today, he is also joined by Matthew Gold, who is an advisor to the provost for digital initiatives at the CUNY Graduate Center. Collectively, they will lead our conversation in exploring publishers' possibilities that has transformed how educators and learners engage with open educational resources. So please join me in welcoming Terrence Meyer and Matthew Gold.
Thank you so much, Allison and David and Tiffany. Thank you to the SREB. We're delighted to be here and to talk to you about Manifold. So I'm going to get us started by introducing the project and giving a kind of overview of it, particularly how it's being used for OER. And then Terrence is going to follow up my presentation with a discussion of some of the specific functionalities and talk about how Manifold works in practice. So first, I want to say that Manifold is a collaboration between three institutions. It's the CUNY Graduate Center in New York City, the University of Minnesota Press in Minneapolis, and Cast Iron Coding in Portland, Oregon. So we have been collaborating for a long time now on this project, and we bring three distinct identities to the project. A digital humanities center, which is what I run, a university press, which is what Terrence is part of, and then a development agency that does all of our coding. And we think those perspectives have really contributed to what Manifold has become, which is a kind of multi-pronged publishing system. We are very grateful to our funders, the Mellon Foundation and the National Endowment for the Humanities, Office of Digital Humanities, which have enabled us to create this publishing platform. So Manifold was originally created basically in 2014, I believe. The Mellon Foundation put out a call to university presses saying, we want you to propose solutions to us for publishing digital monographs. We want to think about the future of digital publishing. And they were writing really just to university presses. They wanted to address the university press landscape. And since I had already collaborated with the University of Minnesota Press on the digital version of my first book, we decided to put in a proposal together for what we wound up calling Manifold. We were lucky enough to get funded, and we built the first version of Manifold. And what we found soon after we started was that university presses were definitely interested in using Manifold to publish their open monographs. But there were also a lot of other people who were interested in using Manifold as a publishing system. And in the years since we first debuted the platform, it has grown in all sorts of directions. I think one of the main ones is in the publishing of open education resources. So what I'm going to do is just show you a couple of instances of Manifold. Basically, each institution that is using Manifold has its own instance with its own homepage like this one. Right now, this is the instance for the City University of New York, which is a 25 campus consortial system. And this is like a homepage that shows all of the different publishing projects. But it's and Manifold at CUNY is the instance that I run. We focus really on open educational resources. But I'm just going to quickly show you a few other institutions that are also using Manifold. First of all, Brown University in Rhode Island is using Manifold in a really interesting way. One of the things they've done is they produced an institutional report on slavery and justice, and they created an experience for all of their incoming students, all their first-year students, to read the book together and comment on it. And they use Manifold for this because Manifold, as Terrence will show, has lots of features that allow for collective annotation and collective reading. One of the main thoughts behind Manifold is that reading can be a kind of social experience. It can be the kind of thing, yes, it's the kind of thing one does privately, but it could also be something, an experience where one collaborates with others. And obviously that's very important for an open educational resource environment, because the idea is not just that you're publishing an open educational resource, but also that you're opening up a space for students and faculty and writers to kind of collect and collaborate and expand on the text that's there. Um, Others using Manifold include Affordable Learning Georgia, which creates OER resources for the state of Georgia. They're publishing a huge range of textbooks and training resources. So they're a very active user of Manifold. There's also the University of Washington, which is it's the University of Washington Press, but also the University of Washington Library. They've been publishing um, open monographs, but they've also been doing things like publishing uh, special books, like on the anniversary of Frankenstein, they published a version of Frankenstein and had a huge um, collective reading experience. Arte Publico Digital Press is using Manifold to publish historical documents and papers from archives, and also publishing digital monographs. The University of Pennsylvania is a new user of Manifold, and they're using Manifold through the libraries to publish open educational resources. University of Minnesota Libraries is using Manifold. And so many different groups, and there are many more that we could mention, about, I think, 35 to 40 publishers that we know of. Manifold is open source software, so we don't know about everyone who's using it, but we also host instances, and those are some of the institutions using Manifold that we know of. So just to talk for a couple of minutes about how Manifold is being used at CUNY, which is, again, we use Manifold a bit differently than, say, the University of Minnesota Press. At the University of Minnesota Press, Terrence, as the digital projects editor, really publishes everything on their platform because it's a press. They don't want to just sort of let anyone come in and publish anything. At CUNY, we're using the same platform, but we use it a bit differently. We have a form on our homepage that allows faculty or students to say, hey, I want to use Manifold, and then we give them permission to publish on the platform. So we view it more as a community platform. And we're seeing it being used in many, many different ways. So just to highlight a few of those, this is a project called Let My People Know, which was created at the City College of New York. And this was a project for a class. And basically, what happened is that they created this project, and they worked with students to annotate this edition of a book that was published about the Spanish Civil War. They published the text, but then they had students sort of annotate it and add all sorts of information. So in this way, Manifold can just be kind of like a base layer of text, and the annotations can add much more. We also we've been seeing at CUNY a lot of use of Manifold to go back and publish archival resources. So our Dominican Studies Institute had some music and resources on bachata. I'm sorry, my Spanish is terrible. I apologize, but they're publishing images and text and music along with
In this
the
DVD, the
text.
bachata.
And you see that you can easily kind of have the text, but you could also publish music, you could publish images, you could publish PDFs, all kinds of other things. We are also seeing Manifold being used to publish dissertations and master's capstone projects. So this is an example of a master's capstone project on American Studies published on Queer and Trans Prison Voices, where the student interviewed people in prison and shared basically a podcast archive and of kind of prisoners reading their own writing, and then added some contextualization around it as their master's project. We're also seeing colleges use Manifold to publish textbooks. This is an example of at Queensborough Community College in New York City. there is a course that is sort of a great books curriculum. So they are publishing great books, and you can see that, like for instance, they're covering a topic like civil rights activism, and there's Dubois, the Souls of Black Folks, and you could see here 64 written annotations by students and 60 highlights. And Terrence will share more about that. Um, this is another example, Audre Lorde's archival writings, where our students and faculty are kind of going into the archives and using Manifold to digitally republish work. So our concept of OER at CUNY definitely involves not just publishing textbooks, but also going into the archives and bringing out our own history of the institution. So we have several projects by people like Audre Lorde who taught at CUNY, and now we're trying to bring their work back into the public. And then we also have some cool projects like Benito Cerino's with Herman Melville's short story, where we have a single text that is being taught at two different colleges. So in this case, it's Hostos Community College and LaGuardia Community College. And you could see that the students are collaborating and reading the book together across the classroom. So Manifold can really provide a basis for collaboration across institutions. And then the last thing I want to show on our homepage is, I should have mentioned journals. It's being used for journals as well. And then we are also seeing it being used for class projects. So just as one example of that, here is an example of a project called We Eat. This is from a graduate course, and as part of the course, students shared recipes from their families, and sort of wrote a little bit to tell a story about it, and then they gave a recipe. So the important thing here is not just what looks like an amazing, delicious dish, but also that Manifold can be used not just to read books with students, but also to create content. And this is, we think, as a group that with our OER initiative, we really focus on kind of this idea of empowering students as knowledge creators. And this is one of the most exciting things, because instead of having students write individual essays for the class, you can have them collaborate on a single project that they create together, and then that ends up being a professionally published book that's online that they can share with their families and their friends. So I'll stop there. Those are some of I would say an overview of some of the ways that Manifold is being used for publishing open educational resources. And I'll pass it over to Terrence, who can talk about some of the specific functionalities of Manifold.
Yeah, thank you for that, Matt. I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully we can all see my browser window. So I'm going to echo a lot of what Matt just said and kind of dive a little into deeper detail for some of the elements he was discussing. So when we talk about Manifold and we land on a homepage like this, one of the first questions we often get is, do I need to create a login? Do I need to register an account for this instance of Manifold? And the answer to that is no. If you just want to read content and peruse the material that's already on an existing Manifold instance, you do not need to have an account to read anything. By default, Manifold is entirely open access. It's possible to restrict access to projects, but by default, everything is freely open. However, if you do want to engage with projects, if you want to follow projects and add them to your kind of like your short list of projects that you're interested in, if you want to annotate, highlight, create reading groups, those sorts of engagements do require that you create an account on an instance. Matt was jumping between instances, and so this is a good kind of point to make, is that those are all effectively siloed off one another. They're not in communication with one another. So if I create an account on this instance of Manifold, the Minnesota instance, that does not mean that I've got an account on the CUNY instance or the Brown instance or the Washington instance. I would need to do that individually. And the way to create an account, you can do it the old-fashioned way with an email and a password, or you can create it with we validate against OAuth, so you do Twitter or X, Facebook, and Google. So those are all valid ways of creating accounts and maintaining your credentials on an instance. When you do get to instance landing page, you're going to see something much like what we saw across all those other ones. Projects by default are basically just sorted into a big block like we're seeing here. And as a publisher or a moderator of an instance, you can refine that. You can curate projects into individual collections. So at Minnesota, we've got our titles kind of broken down into newest releases, titles that have won prizes, titles in a specific series. So you can kind of curate those into a specific series, and so forth. So you can really have a lot of control at the granular level of what you're showing to your readers on the homepage to get them excited about the content, and kind of give them a good entry point into your material. Alternatively, and this probably isn't as much a use case here, but it is possible to set up a Manifold instance where it runs without a landing page, an existing landing page. This is something that the Athabasca University Press does. They didn't want to have a competing website with their already existing web presence. And so instead of having a presence like this, you go to the University Press website, you click into a book detail, and then when you want to read it online, they're an entirely OA press, it takes you to the Manifold project, and you're immediately in the Manifold experience. So as a reader, I think I'm just at the Athabasca University Press website, but for folks in the know, they've actually understand that you're now using the Manifold platform to engage with the material and have it be powered by that. So I'm going to jump into an individual project right now. I'm going to jump into metagaming. And we kind of browsed through some of what was happening before. But when we created Manifold, some of the things that we wanted to, that informed our creation of it, was we wanted to give authors the space to work iteratively. So for folks who didn't have a final monograph, getting back to what Matt was saying about it was kind of created for the University Press experience first, we realized that a lot of authors wanted to be able to create iterative publications. They didn't want to just have a final manuscript. They wanted to author chapters, author papers, and load those up as they're ready and kind of build towards a monograph. And then we also really, really wanted to provide an experience where instead of having a print book and then like a URL on the inside of it saying, look at this website that's completely divorced from the print artifact, we wanted to marry those two things together. And so that's what we're going to see a little bit of in this project here. So metagaming is a book that's about video game studies. The authors actually created downloadable apps where you can play through some of the concepts they describe in the text. So it's providing an experience to readers that it was just simply impossible to get from the print edition. Now, each Manifold project is made up of what we call content blocks, excuse me. And each of these is effectively like a Lego block, right? And each Lego block stacks on top of one another and they serve a different purpose. The first one is the only one that's required of every project. And this is just basically the space where you give it a title, provide author information. If you've got some graphics you can associate it with the project, some descriptive copy, and then you've got a space for what we call calls to actions, which are what these links and buttons are here. These are entirely customizable. They can read differently. They can point to different elements, but they're meant to be specific to the project. So if you want to encourage readers to do something or to download something or to go visit a specific place, that's your opportunity to do that. This project has one core text. That's not required of a Manifold project, but this one does have it, as most of the Minnesota titles do, because again, we're a university press, we're publishing books. Most of our titles are going to just have that one core text, but we're going to investigate what it looks like when you don't have one core text. So in this case, we have got an EPUB. This is the same EPUB that the press sent off to our other digital vendors, whether it's Apple or Amazon or Kobo or Barnes & Noble, and we loaded it into Manifold here. And we have this table of contents. It's a dynamic digital table of contents that allows us to jump directly into the book itself. So I've jumped into chapter 1, and you can start to see that as the project loads. We've got various highlights. We've got underlined passages. We've got this thumbnail that's sitting off over here to the right or to the left. So if we ignore the thumbnail for a second and all the colors, that base layer, the text that we're seeing at the background, that's the EPUB text. That's matching the print edition exactly. The only real difference from those two is that images that appeared black and white in the book are color here. And instead of having a paginated experience, there's no codex. It's a single scroll. So it's much more like a web experience in this space. And then as we kind of move through this, you'll see that these authors wanted to annotate this specific passage of text, not with a bibliographic site, but with a resource that informs whatever they're discussing here. In this case, it's a pretty static image, nothing too exciting, but this can be a movie, this could be a digital map, it could be an audio file, it could be a video. You play through that content in this space, and then we didn't have a lot of metadata for this, but you can see where the metadata would be stored. And then you close out of it as a reader, I'm right back in the reading experience. So I've never left. So again, that's kind of getting at that sense of being able to marry the digital and the print into like one space here in the electronics area. And then as we scroll down, I'm going to find an underlined passage. And when we do that, we can see that the passage that was underlined is given pride of place in this drawer that's slid out. And then we get to see an annotation and the discussion thread begin to grow from that. And so that's a way for users to engage with one another or to just simply leave annotations for themselves. So each annotation has a number of different privacy settings that can be associated with it. The default ones are public and private. If it's a private annotation, that's just you writing in the margins of your book, just for you. If it's public, everybody can see it and people can respond to it. Additionally, when you highlight a passage of text, you see this little pop-up come up, and then it gives you this opportunity for a current group. And you see public and private, like I just said. I'm a member of another reading group, and I can associate my annotation with that reading group. So perhaps I'm in a class and the instructor has created a reading group for us to all engage with. I would select that reading group in that space. And if it's a private reading group, then all of us in the class have access to it, and we are able to see one another's annotations, but nobody who's not a part of that group would be able to access it. So it's a private space, it's a private sandbox for us all to collaboratively engage with one another without having to worry about people looking over our shoulders and seeing what we're doing. It's just this nice safe space for us to engage with the content as a class group. It's also worth pointing out that Manifold is responsive. So whether or not you're working on a tablet or a cell phone, everything that you can do on the digital or on a desktop environment, you can do in the mobile environment as well. And we work very, very hard to make Manifold as accessible as possible as well. So if you're using only a keyboard and a screen reader, no problem. You can still engage with the content and get a very rich experience from that. Other features from the reader itself. Oh, and I should mention, how do you get content in here? I mentioned that we brought an EPUB into here. That was our first sort of thinking of bringing content in. But as kind of the scope of the project expanded, we added support for HTML, Markdown, which is effectively HTML-Lite, Word documents in the docx format, and Google Documents. Those are all viable means of bringing content into the system. And if you don't like any of those options, you also have the ability now to author content directly in the Manifold backend. So you can actually create content in the Manifold backend. We generally don't recommend it because there's no autosave feature, but it would be easy enough to start in Google Docs, bring that into the system, and then begin editing it from there if you need to. So you have a lot of opportunities for how you get content into this space. And if it's well structured, meaning that there's headings that follow after one another, heading 2, heading 3, and so forth, it will display in this contents dropdown so readers can jump to different sections. This right here, let me get out of that, is effectively like a running head or a running foot in a book. So as you scroll, it'll change from like 1 to the name of the chapter title or whatever the name of the section is. This notebook is going to give you an opportunity to see where your engagements are in the text and under what context you've made them. So I can see that I've left an annotation here publicly, and if I click on this, it's going to take me directly to that space. So it allows me to quickly move through all my engagements within a text. It's also worth noting that there's a lot going on this page right now. As I look at it, it's like, wow, I can see that a lot of folks have engaged with this, but I may not want to see all of that right now. Maybe I just want to see the base layer. You have this ability to do that with this eye icon. You can toggle and select exactly what you want to see. So if you're a part of a reading group in a classroom, you might want to just see the engagements from that class, as opposed to the engagements that have been made by everybody publicly. So you can really dial in your experience to see exactly what you want to see. And like most other reading environments, you can change between serif and sans serif font, between light and dark mode, move through the margins and all that sort of good stuff. So that's what we're looking at with a kind of basic Manifold project. That's basically just one core text and then a series of resources. Now, those resources can be placed in the text like we just looked at, and they can also be collected into this resource content block, So if I'm a curious user, curious reader, I can jump into a specific resource, see it as an object of inquiry for itself, maybe add a comment to it and leave it right there. So there can be discussion for individual resources as well. Um, but otherwise, for this project, not much. It's pretty basic in that regard. Jumping over to the CUNY instance and taking a look at one of the projects on Matt's instance, this is a project that was developed by a number of different faculty and is used pedagogically. There's lots of students engaged with it. You'll notice that there's a different content block right here. This is what we call a markdown content block. And the reason it's called that is simply because it uses markdown syntax, but it's basically a free text space which you can use for any purpose. You can announce that this project has won an award. You can embed a video in this space to, like maybe recorded by the author or a specific person to welcome the community to your project. Or you can provide, like here, some instructions or some things that you want to be mindful of as you navigate through this project, some directions. And actually, the fact this does have a little bit of a dynamic element here because it's got some SoundCloud embeds right in this space. And that's given pride of place. Right after the description of the project, you get that right here. All these content blocks can be moved around, reordered. So a lot of versatility is what you're doing here. Now, this project doesn't have one core text. It's got a number of different texts. These are all uncategorized, but like we saw earlier, you can categorize different texts. So you can have core text, supporting texts. Maybe you've got English and Spanish and French. You got different translations. You've got lots of versatile opportunities to organize your materials in a way that's most helpful for readers. And so this is going to be the same sort of experience. You're going to jump directly into a text, but instead of having it be done by way of an individual table of contents, it's going to be from that list of all the available texts. And if this has a structured TOC, you can jump through that within that individual space as well. So a lot of opportunities for providing a really rich experience for your readers through the Manifold projects. And you can see that right here, lots of different kinds of content blocks portrayed in different sorts of ways. Last thing I want to show off before I turn over to Q&A is the opportunity. I mentioned reading groups earlier. And so I'm going to just go over to the public reading groups on the CUNY instance. And when you go to a reading group, whoever creates the reading group has the opportunity to curate that reading group and basically add content to it. You may have noticed those different sorts of star icons that were sitting next to different elements in the Manifold experience. You could see it next to, if we jump into the text, you can see it in this space, you can see it in these elements. All those are opportunities to add that content to a reading group, kind of collected and curated in this space. And as a reading group moderator, I can then organize that content in a way that's useful for folks coming to this space and who are a part of that reading group. So if I'm moderating this reading group for a class, I can collect all this material and say, hey, class, the first 6 weeks, we're going to be talking about this, and this is why we're going to be talking about it. These are our learning objectives. Move forward. After that, we're going to be talking about these things. These are the projects. These are the specific resources that I want you to focus on, and so forth. And as you do that, you can also, from this space, see all the annotations. This one doesn't have any, but you would see all the annotations right in this space, jump directly to them. You could sort through them, see who's made them, in what context. You can see all the members and whatnot. So a lot of different opportunities for not only adding content to the system, but the reading groups allows you to, in a way, remix it for your own purposes in a way that's most beneficial for your readers. So I'll stop there and we can move on to the questions and so forth.
Thank you, Terrence, for just walking us through the Manifold and showing us how we can marry the digital and also the print versions, which I definitely find really intriguing as a former educator, just being able to, to have that one-stop shop and have all of your resources in one instance. So we're going to open this session up for Q&A. So I see that we have a pretty intimate group here, but please feel free to use the chat. And if you have any questions that you would like to ask to Terrence or Matthew at this time, please feel free to go ahead and do so.
While we're waiting for questions, I just want to note that kind of following up on what Terrence said and what I mentioned, that there are a number of different ways to set up instances. So the way that Minnesota is running it, as I mentioned earlier, has Terrence as the person who's publishing things on the actual platform. At CUNY, we give faculty direct access to the back end to create projects. Although we have a kind of step in between where they sort of propose projects to us and indicate their interest, but with the different ways to scope roles on the back end on the dashboard, there are many different ways one could set it up, and it really depends on one's specific institutional context. Manifold, as a publishing platform, allows for different ways to kind of structure it. It's kind of agnostic, and it's really, you can, if one is using Manifold, one can set it up in a way that is in accordance with one's own institutional structures.
Matthew, as you were speaking, that reminded me of a question in regards to offering professional development for the institutions. Do you have a regular schedule in which you can offer the professional development? Like, how is it that the professors are aware of how to use Manifold?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we at CUNY, just to kind of give you an idea of like what kind of support is needed, we are a very active user of Manifold as an institution, right? We've got one instance, but we've got over 600 projects on it. Faculty and students have really kind of taken to it. With all of that, we do have a single full-time employee, Robin Miller, who is focused on providing support, but that's to 25 different colleges, and we have 2 part-time graduate students who work with us. So basically, the way we've designed our support of Manifold at CUNY is that we have taken a kind of train the trainer approach, where we will generally give presentations where we have librarians at the different colleges will kind of come and ask questions of Robin, and then be able, hopefully the idea is that hopefully they will be able to support faculty at their own institutions. But then Robin also does work individually with faculty. We found that it's faculty using Manifold with their classes really haven't had, I think the biggest uh, kind of pressure point is getting texts and resources into the platform. Kind of using the platform with classes has been surprisingly easy for faculty and students. Students really appreciate the ease of use and the aesthetics of it. I think they've really responded to the fact that it looks and feels like a modern publishing platform, and it sort of is of the kind of current moment of the web. They can, as Terrence said, they could use it on their phones just as easily as on a tablet or a desktop. So the students really haven't needed too much help, and the main kind of issue has been how to prepare text for sort of publishing within Manifold, because the way that Manifold works, as Terrence said, we really prioritize having it be responsive. So like, we do want it to work as well on a phone as it does on a laptop. And in order for that to happen, when you publish on Manifold, you do want to use kind of structured markup. So instead of, when you've got a title of a project, instead of putting it in bold and 55 font, it's better to sort of like mark it as a title in your Word doc before you bring it into Manifold. So that kind of structured markup, like, definitely we've had to train people on that, but we haven't found that the kind of the support burden has been really too extensive. And we just regularly provide open workshops, community meetups, and then just sort of like provide consulting as needed.
Thank you. Going to check the chat again to see if we have any additional questions. Okay, so it looks like we don't have any additional questions. Thank you, Terrence and Matthew, for just sharing your expertise with us and how you are utilizing open educational resources. I am going to share a QR code to get your feedback for those of you who are still here. If you would, give me just one moment. I am going to share my screen. Please feel free to either scan a QR code or there should be a link in the chat that you can use as well to kind of give us feedback on how we can improve this experience overall. The survey should take no longer than 2 to 3 minutes. We are just curious to learn how we can enhance our webinars. So we want to hear from you. Don't leave just yet. So I'll leave that up there for a few minutes. Okay. See here. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and transition to sharing my contact information. If you have any questions or any concerns that you would like to share about today's presentation, please feel free to do so. This is my email address and also my contact number. So feel free to reach out. Thank you guys for coming. We definitely enjoyed the conversation. It's been a positive learning experience. So thank you. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for having us.